Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop your answers and any suggestions in the comments, and I might give you a shout out at the end of my next video. Thanks for being here and for all your amazing support.
The first time it happened, Emma Foster thought she was dreaming. She woke up to the soft ticking of her wall clock and the faint hum of her laptop charger glowing blue in the dark. Her dorm room at Riverside University was small: 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 cracked mirror hanging opposite her mattress. The digital clock beside her pillow read 3:07 a.m. in sharp red digits. She tried to reach for her phone. Her hand wouldn't move. A familiar panic crawled up her throat. She could see everything: her roommate's side of the room, the posters on the wall, even the outline of her own blanket. But her body felt cemented into the bed. Her breath came in short bursts. Her chest rose once, then stopped. She wasn't choking, but she couldn't breathe right either. And then she saw it. In the mirror across the room, just faintly under the dim light of the hallway leaking through the doorframe, her reflection blinked. Only Emma hadn't. Her real eyes were wide open, frozen in terror, but the reflection tilted its head slightly, like someone watching her behind glass. The reflection's mouth twitched into something resembling a smile. Slow, deliberate, unnatural. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to scream, to move, to do anything, but she couldn't even blink. The reflection's hand lifted. It waved once, the movement lazy, mocking. Then the room went black. When she woke up, the morning sunlight burned her eyes. The clock read 9:42 a.m. Her roommate Jenna was gone. Everything looked normal, except the mirror. A faint crack ran diagonally through the glass, like a lightning strike frozen in time. For the next few nights, Emma didn't sleep. She told herself it was exhaustion, maybe stress from midterms. She buried herself in coursework, stayed late in the library, scrolled endlessly through her phone. But the moment she tried to rest, the same anxiety gnawed at her spine, that if she closed her eyes, the paralysis would come back. On the 4th night, she couldn't fight it anymore. She fell asleep around midnight, headphones still playing low ambient music. When she opened her eyes again, she already knew. Her limbs were locked, her jaw wouldn't move. The air felt thick, like breathing through syrup. And the clock glowed 3:07 a.m. again. The mirror looked darker now, as if something was moving behind it. Her reflection was there, but something was off. Its eyes looked wet, glossy, almost alive. The face in the glass leaned closer until its forehead pressed against the inside of the mirror. The glass fogged slightly, as if it was breathing too. Then a faint tapping sound echoed through the room. Tap, tap, tap. Emma realized with growing horror that the sound was coming from inside the mirror. The tapping grew louder, sharper, until a faint crack formed where the reflection's palm pressed. The sound vibrated in her ears. She couldn't move, couldn't look away. The reflection leaned even closer, so close she could see its pupils dilate. Then, in a breathy whisper that didn't sound like her voice at all, it said, "You shouldn't have looked at me." Her body jolted awake so violently she fell off the bed, gasping. The mirror stood still, unbroken. No crack, no fog, nothing. But the clock still read 3:07 a.m. She told Jenna everything the next morning. At first, her roommate laughed it off. Sleep paralysis, hallucinations, maybe caffeine overload. But when Emma described the talking reflection, Jenna's face went pale. She quietly admitted that sometimes, when Emma snored, she thought she heard whispers too. soft, rhythmic, coming from the mirror's direction. That night, they decided to cover it with a bedsheet. They taped it from corner to corner, blocking the reflection completely. Emma felt ridiculous doing it, but it gave her a strange sense of comfort. For 3 nights, nothing happened. She slept soundly, almost too soundly. But on the 4th night, her sleep paralysis returned. This time, she couldn't even see the mirror. The sheet hung limp and still, but she could hear it. A scratching sound, like nails dragging across glass. Slow, precise, continuous. Then came the whisper, "Take it down." Her heart stopped cold. The voice was faint but perfectly clear, her own voice. "Take it down, Emma. I can't see you." She strained to move, her muscles screaming silently. The scratching grew louder until she felt the air vibrate. Then, with a sudden rip, the bedsheet fell. The mirror was uncovered again. But what she saw wasn't a reflection. It was her, but twisted. The face in the glass looked burned, its eyes blackened at the edges. It smiled, wide and wrong, and slowly raised its hand. In its palm lay a shard of glass, dripping with something dark. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to scream, and this time a sound escaped, a dry, ragged wheeze. The reflection's mouth opened in sync, whispering the same word over and over. "Switch. Switch. Switch." The lights flickered, the walls shuddered. Then, for a second, she felt something cold grip her wrist, not in the dream, but physically. Her paralysis broke. She shot upright, gasping for air, hand trembling. A long, thin cut ran across her wrist. Fresh blood. The mirror was perfectly intact. The next day, Emma begged the dorm supervisor to let her change rooms. They agreed. After all, there were reports of odd sounds from that room before. She packed everything, leaving the mirror covered once more. That night, she stayed at Jenna's cousin's apartment across campus. A clean slate, no mirrors near her bed. She felt safe again. Until 3:07 a.m. She woke up paralyzed, heart pounding, unable to breathe. There was no mirror now, but the reflection still found her. It was standing at the foot of the bed. Her, identical in every detail, except for the black eyes and the cut wrist. It leaned closer, whispering the same breathy voice. "You moved the mirror, Emma, but you forgot I live inside you." Emma's pulse stopped cold. Her double crawled up the bed slowly, movements jerky, unnatural, face twisted into a grin. Its hand reached for her throat, and the moment the fingers touched her skin, everything went dark. When she awoke at sunrise, she was back in her old dorm room. The mirror stood opposite her bed, uncovered. The crack that had once been faint now spread like spiderweb veins across its surface. The clock read 3:07 a.m. again. She stumbled out of bed, tears burning her eyes, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she'd been dreaming the move. Maybe she'd never left. But when she reached for her bag, she found something inside that froze her blood. A folded bedsheet, the same one she'd used to cover the mirror, stained with bloody handprints. Over the next few days, Emma stopped attending classes. She avoided mirrors, even her phone's front camera. She taped black paper over every reflective surface she could find. Her friends thought she was having a breakdown. Maybe she was. On the 6th night, she sent Jenna a voice note at 3:06 a.m. It was short, just a whisper. "If I disappear, don't come here. The mirror wants you next." The next morning, campus security broke into the room after no response. The mirror was shattered completely. Glass scattered across the floor in a perfect circle. Emma was gone. But inside the largest piece of remaining glass, the officers swore they could see a smiling reflection, eyes open, waiting, frozen, at 3:07 a.m.
A short and quick announcement here. If you're still listening and enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It truly helps more than you know. And if you can, share it with your friends and family so our little horror family can keep growing. When Isabel Turner drove into Utah that winter evening, the snow was falling sideways. She'd been on the road for 10 hours, nursing shifts, double pay, endless overtime. All she wanted was a warm bed and a few hours of silence before heading to the next hospital. The GPS guided her to a small roadside inn just off the highway. Evergreen Motel, vacancy. The neon sign flickered weakly through the storm. Inside, the lobby was empty except for an elderly man behind the counter reading a newspaper. "Room for one?" she asked, brushing snow from her jacket. He smiled faintly, the skin around his eyes pale and paper-thin. "Only one left open tonight," he said, sliding the key across the counter. The tag read, "Room 9." The hall was quiet. Every footstep echoed off the thin walls. When Isabel entered her room, she felt the temperature drop. The air was colder than outside, the kind that bit through her clothes. She twisted the thermostat. Nothing. The heater rattled once and fell silent. The room was plain. One bed, one window, one small mirror above the dresser. The sheets were clean, but the walls had water stains shaped like hands. She shrugged, locked the door, and crawled into bed fully clothed. Her body sank into the mattress with relief. It didn't take long to fall asleep. Sometime after midnight, she awoke. The air was freezing, so cold that her breath fogged instantly. Her hands were numb. She tried to pull the blanket closer, but her body wouldn't move. Her chest tightened, her legs, her arms, even her jaw, completely frozen. Panic gripped her. Her eyes flicked toward the mirror across from the bed. Frost had spread across its surface in delicate white patterns. And within that frost, a second reflection moved. Not hers. It looked like a woman, lying in the same position as Isabel, but her skin was pale blue. Her eyes were open wide, staring back. The woman's lips parted, whispering silently through the frost. The glass trembled. Isabel wanted to scream, but her throat locked. The air in her lungs felt sharp, like inhaling glass shards. Then came the whisper, faint, far away. "Don't breathe. You'll wake her." Her vision blurred. She felt a weight pressed down on her chest, heavy and cold. For a moment, she thought she could see a face hovering just above her. A woman's face, gaunt, rimed with frost, breathless. The lights flickered once, then everything went dark. When she could move again, her body jerked upright. The air was normal, warm even. The frost was gone from the mirror. She stared at it for a long time before daring to get up. At the front desk, the old man was still awake, sipping tea. "Everything all right?" he asked when she handed back the key. "The heater's broken, and She stopped. How could she explain that she'd seen her own reflection freeze to death? He looked down at the key tag and sighed. "Room 9 again," he muttered. "I keep meaning to close that one off." "Why?" she asked. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the dark window. "Some rooms keep the cold longer than others," he said quietly. "That one more than most." Then he added, almost to himself, "A woman passed there in the winter of '82, nurse, like you. Heater failed. They didn't find her until morning. She forced a laugh. "You're joking." He didn't smile. "I never joke about the dead." She switched rooms, room 3, at the far end of the hall, and tried to shake it off. Coincidence, exhaustion, a story to scare guests. By 2 a.m. she was back in bed, lights off, body still trembling. Then she heard it again. The heater, humming, just faintly. The air turned cold. She sat up, except she couldn't. Her limbs locked again, stiff and unyielding. Her breath fogged in front of her, and this time she wasn't in room 3 anymore. The walls were different, older, darker. The window was covered in frost. And across the room stood the mirror from room 9. Her reflection was back, but the figure inside it wasn't frozen anymore. It was smiling. The reflection lifted its arm and pressed its palm against the inside of the glass. Frost bloomed where its fingers touched, spreading like veins. "So warm. Stay a little longer." A sharp crack echoed through the room. The mirror split down the center. Behind the fracture, Isabel saw something move, slowly, crawling toward her from the other side. A pale, naked figure, dragging itself through snow and glass. Its eyes were frozen open, mouth stiff, skin splitting as it reached forward. The smell of cold, thick, chemical, metallic, filled her nose. The thing pressed its face against the glass until it shattered completely. Isabel woke up screaming. The front desk light flickered as she ran down the hall barefoot, heart hammering in her throat. The clerk was gone. Snow drifted in through the lobby door, though it had been locked earlier. She stumbled outside into the freezing air, lungs burning. Her car was covered in ice, the doors sealed shut. She turned back toward the motel. All the lights were out except one, room 9. A faint blue glow pulsed through the window, rhythmic and steady, like breathing. By sunrise, she'd left the motel far behind. The highway was buried in snow, the radio dead, her coffee cold. She told herself again and again that it was sleep paralysis, nothing more. Her body half asleep, her mind dreaming. But when she stopped at a gas station 2 hours later, something caught her eye in the rearview mirror. On the back seat lay the key tag for room 9. She hadn't taken it. It was coated in a thin layer of frost. And when she picked it up, she saw something etched faintly into the metal. Letters so small she had to hold them close to read. "See you tonight." That night, Isabel stayed at a large hotel in Salt Lake City, crowded, bright, safe. She kept the thermostat high, slept with the TV on. She dreamed of snow falling against a window and a woman lying still under the covers. When the woman's eyes opened, she realized she was staring into her own frozen face. The mirror on the far wall cracked in that same diagonal line. At 3:12 a.m., the fire alarm in her room went off. She shot up in bed, gasping, every muscle tight. Her phone screen glowed on the nightstand. New voicemail. 1. She pressed play. It was faint breathing at first, then a whisper, her own voice, but colder, slower. "It's warm here now." Her hotel room lights flickered, and her breath turned visible. The next morning, housekeeping found Isabel asleep on the bed, body stiff, room temperature below freezing. The windows were sealed shut from the inside, coated with frost that spelled a single word across the glass: "Stay."
When Hannah Lewis rented her new flat in London, she thought she'd found a miracle. It was cheap, central, and surprisingly spacious for the price. though the estate agent's nervous smile should have been her first warning. "Bit of an old building," he said as she signed the papers. "Sound carries at night. Don't be alarmed." She didn't think much of it. London was full of noises, buses, neighbors, sirens. But the first night she spent there, she realized the agent had meant something else entirely. Because what she heard wasn't noise, it was whispering. It began around 3 a.m., soft and distant, like a radio playing 2 rooms away. Hannah lay in bed, half asleep, listening. The whispers rose and fell in a rhythm, not random, but structured. Too slow to be English, too melodic to be mumbling. She sat up and held her breath. It was coming from beneath her bed. She leaned over the edge, heart thudding, but the whispering stopped. Only silence and her own breathing filled the room. The next morning she brushed it off. New city, new home, thin walls. She told herself she was being silly. But the following night, the whispers came again. They started the same way, faint, distant. Then, one by one, more voices joined in. Men, women, even what sounded like children, all whispering together, overlapping, weaving through each other in eerie harmony. A choir of voices singing something she couldn't understand. She tried covering her ears with a pillow. It didn't help. The sound wasn't in the room. It was in her head. When she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, she dreamed she was standing in a church filled with shadows. Candles flickered. Figures knelt in pews, heads bowed, whispering that same chant. When she looked closer, she saw that every figure had no mouth. They sang through the open wounds in their throats. By the third night, Hannah hadn't slept properly in 2 days. She kept the lights on, TV blaring, anything to drown out the whispers. But at exactly 3 a.m., they returned, louder than before. She tried to get up, to turn on music, to move, but she couldn't. Her entire body was frozen, eyes wide open, breath shallow. Sleep paralysis. The voices swelled, chanting faster now. Latin words, she realized, though she didn't understand their meaning. Her father had been a church organist. She recognized the structure, the cadence. Then she heard her name. Hannah. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even loud. But hearing it within that chant made her heart seize. Hannah. Suscipe eam. The air grew thick and cold. Her gaze darted to the corner of the room. Shadows pooled there, writhing like smoke, and from within them, hands began to form, pale, trembling, reaching upward. She wanted to scream, but her mouth wouldn't open. Her throat made a sound like choking. The whispers became singing, beautiful, haunting, inhuman. It filled the room, surrounding her, vibrating through her chest. Then, slowly, the mattress beneath her began to sink, as if something was pulling her down from below. She could feel the fabric moving, stretching, hands pressing up against it from underneath. And then, just before everything went black, a single phrase rose above the rest of the chant. Requiem aeternam dona ei. Grant her eternal rest. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the window. Her sheets were soaked with sweat. It had felt so real, the voices, the chanting, the cold. But when she swung her legs off the bed, she froze. The floor was covered in ashes, thin gray dust scattered in a perfect circle around the bed. That afternoon, Hannah took her phone to the local church, a stone chapel tucked between offices and flats. The priest, Father David, looked up from his paperwork as she approached. "Forgive me," she said quietly. "I think something's wrong with my flat." He listened patiently as she described the whispers, the paralysis, the chant. When she repeated the Latin words she remembered,
His expression changed. "That's part of a funeral mass, a requiem." "For the dead?" He nodded, "Yes. For souls passing on. But you said they're whispering your name." Hannah nodded, throat dry. He sighed heavily. "There are places in London where old sanctuaries once stood. When buildings rise over graves, sometimes the walls remember." He wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to her, the address of an exorcist he trusted. But before she could leave, he added quietly, "If they've started calling to you, don't wait. Once the chant finishes, the soul they name is claimed." That night, Hannah did everything she could to avoid sleep. Caffeine, cold showers, blaring music, but her body eventually gave in. She woke up in total darkness. The lamp was off, her limbs wouldn't move. The chanting had already begun. Louder now, hundreds of voices. The floor trembled beneath her. A faint glow flickered under the bed, lighting up the floorboards like firelight. And through that glow, faces began to appear, pressed against the underside of the mattress, eyes open, mouths moving in unison. "Hannah Lewis!" She tried to scream. Her jaw wouldn't obey. "Requiem aeternum dona ei." The words rose, beautiful and cold. The floor beneath the bed split with a sound like cracking stone. The light below turned red. Smoke poured out, curling around the room. Hands reached out from the fissure, pulling at her sheets, clutching her wrists. She could feel them tugging her down. The mattress sank deeper, the air filled with a stench of ash and burning incense. The whispers became screams. "Grant her rest! Grant her rest! Grant her rest!" The walls pulsed, alive with movement, faces pushing through the plaster, mouths wide, singing the same unholy hymn. With one last surge of strength, Hannah broke free from the paralysis, gasping. She rolled out the bed, hitting the floor hard. The voices stopped instantly. The room was silent. Only the faint scent of smoke lingered. She didn't stay another night. By morning, she'd packed everything she owned into her car and left. But as she drove through the early London fog, the radio flickered to life, even though it was off. Static filled the car. Then through the distortion came the faint hum of a choir. The same melody, the same Latin. Requiem. Her phone lit up on the passenger seat, an incoming call, unknown number. She picked it up with shaking hands. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then a voice, her own voice, whispered softly, "Amen." The call ended. Later that week, the landlord visited the flat to prepare it for new tenants. The rooms were spotless, except for the bedroom. The ceiling above the bed was blackened, as if burned, and written across it in soot were the faint words, "The choir has her now."
When Daniel Morris returned to his childhood home, it didn't feel like coming back. The air inside smelled the same: old wood, dust, and faint traces of cedar polish. But something else hung there now, something heavier. His father had died 3 weeks earlier. The funeral was small, the kind of quiet service Daniel knew his dad would have wanted. Afterward, his mother insisted on staying with her sister in Oregon, leaving Daniel to pack up the house alone. It was an old place, built in the 1950s, the kind of home where every floorboard knew your name. The hallway was lined with faded family photos. At the end stood his old bedroom, untouched since the day he'd left for college 12 years ago. The moment he opened the door, the air changed. The room looked smaller now, darker.
His old posters still clung to the walls, their corners curled. The closet door, that damn closet door, was still there, slightly crooked, paint chipped along the edges. He remembered it vividly. The nights he'd lie awake, staring at that door, convinced something inside was breathing. His dad had laughed, told him it was the heating vent behind the wall. But even as an adult, the sound had never made sense. It hadn't been air, it had been alive. He brushed it off as nostalgia. Grief did strange things to memory. He spent the day boxing up his father's clothes, sorting through paperwork, sipping whiskey to numb the emptiness. By evening, exhaustion hit him hard. He lay on the bed without changing, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily above him. He was asleep within minutes. And then he woke, or thought he did. The room was dark, faint moonlight spilling across the carpet. He could see, but he couldn't move. His body felt locked in invisible chains. His chest rose shallowly, air dragging in slow, painful pulls. Then came the sound. That same slow breathing from the closet. Inhale, exhale. Soft at first, then louder, closer. Daniel's eyes darted to the door. The thin line of shadow between it and the frame trembled, just slightly, like someone inside was pressing their face against the crack. He tried to shout, but his voice stayed trapped in his throat. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might stop. The breathing quickened, and beneath it, a faint whisper. Danny. His body lurched. He hadn't been called that name since his father's voice said it last. He forced his muscles to move, jerking upright in bed. The sound stopped instantly. The closet door stood still, perfectly closed. He stared at it for a long time, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. But when he finally lay back down, he noticed the faint outline of fingerprints on the inside of the closet glass. The next morning, Daniel convinced himself it was a dream, sleep paralysis, grief hallucination. He'd read about both. Still, he couldn't shake the dread. He left the closet closed all day, stacking boxes in front of it like a barricade. That night, rain drummed softly against the roof. The house felt alive, groaning, shifting, remembering him. Sometime after midnight, the paralysis hit again. He was flat on his back, eyes wide open, body frozen. The rain outside had stopped, leaving a silence that made the ticking clock sound deafening. Then he heard the closet door creak, slowly, deliberately, his gaze fixed on it, helpless. The boxes he'd stacked in front of it had slid away. He didn't know how, but the space was clear now. The door opened inch by inch, darkness spilling out like smoke. A hand emerged, pale, long fingers curling around the door frame, then another hand pulling the door wider. Something stepped out. His vision blurred, but he could see its shape, human but wrong. The limbs too thin, the skin almost translucent, stretched tight over bone. Its face was a distorted copy of his own, same jawline, same eyes, but its smile was impossibly wide, frozen, teeth like chipped glass. It leaned close, whispering in a voice that was his, but hollow. "You left me in the dark." Daniel's breath hitched. The thing crawled closer, its joints cracking, its breath cold against his cheek. "All those years," it whispered. "You closed the door. I waited." The lights flickered, the air heavy with the smell of rot. Then, with a violent snap, the paralysis broke. Daniel stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, slamming the closet door shut. He shoved the dresser against it and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day he called his mother. "Did Dad ever say anything about the closet?" he asked, trying to sound casual. There was a long pause on the line. "What closet?" "In my old room. I used to hear breathing. He told me it was the vent behind the wall." Her voice went quiet. "There was no vent behind that wall, Daniel." He froze. "What?" "That's why your father sealed it years ago. He didn't want you to worry. He just painted over the vent hole. There was nothing inside." But there had been something. He could feel it. That night he decided to prove it to himself, to face it. He grabbed a hammer and flashlight, pushed the dresser aside, and opened the door. Inside, the small space was empty. Bare wooden walls, dust, and old coats hanging limp. Nothing more. But then he noticed the back panel. It looked newer than the rest, nailed unevenly, like someone had sealed it quickly. He knelt and shined the flashlight on it. The wood was damp, and faintly, carved into it, were words, "I can't breathe." The hammer slipped from his hand. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the dresser. His chest felt tight, like someone was pressing against it. The air grew heavier by the second. Then, the breathing started again. Louder, right in front of him. He froze, flashlight trembling. The panel in the closet bulged outward, as if something behind it was pushing to get out. He dropped the flashlight. It hit the floor, spinning, the beam rolling wildly. And for a split second, he saw an eye staring through the crack. His own eye. Daniel woke hours later on the floor, the hammer beside him. The closet door was shut again, the flashlight dead. He tried to convince himself he'd fainted, dreamed the rest. But the panel was gone, torn clean off. And on the inside of the closet door, something had been scratched into the wood. Shallow, desperate marks forming one word. Open. He didn't sleep again. Not for days. He spent his time packing faster, staying out of the room as much as possible, but the house wasn't letting him go. Every night, the breathing grew louder, closer, even when he slept downstairs. On his final night, he gave up pretending to be brave. He dragged his sleeping bag into the living room, turned on every light, and locked every door. Just after 3 a.m., he woke to that familiar paralysis. Only this time, he wasn't in the living room anymore. He was back in his old bed. The closet door stood open. From inside, something moved. Slow, crawling, scraping. The floorboards moaned under its weight. He couldn't see clearly, but he could hear it whispering. The voice wasn't quite his anymore, deeper, broken. "You came home so I could breathe again." The figure stepped into the light. It wore his father's clothes. Its face was Daniel's, pale and sunken, and where its mouth should have been, there was only a gaping hole, gasping like a lung. It climbed onto his bed, kneeling over him. Its hands gripped his throat, cold and trembling. Your turn to live inside the dark. The last thing Daniel saw before everything went black was his own reflection in the creature's hollow eye, mouth open.
When Luke Harrington booked Cabin 12,
He wanted nothing but silence. The last few months had drained him. Constant city noise, the pressure of a half-finished novel, and a mind that refused to rest. The ad promised peace. Remote cabin near Lake Ely, Vermont. No Wi-Fi, no distractions. It sounded perfect. He arrived just before dusk, winding through endless pine trees until the gravel road disappeared into wilderness. The cabin stood small and crooked under a canopy of branches, its porch sagging slightly. A rusty sign nailed beside the door read, "Cabin 12," its paint nearly worn away. Inside, everything smelled of pine and dust. There was one bedroom, a stone fireplace, a wooden table, and a single framed photograph. A man in a park ranger uniform, standing stiffly beside the lake. The name tag was faded, but the badge still gleamed faintly, Ranger Ellis. Luke shrugged it off. Small-town nostalgia, probably. He unpacked his typewriter, poured coffee, and told himself he'd start fresh at dawn. That night, the silence was suffocating. The forest outside didn't hum with crickets or wind, it just watched. The kind of quiet that presses on your eardrums. Luke fell asleep around midnight, the faint smell of damp wood filling the air. When he woke, he couldn't move. His mind was sharp, aware, but his body was frozen. His eyes darted around the room, but nothing responded. The only sound was the low groan of the cabin's timbers shifting in the cold. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, crunching against old wood floor. Luke's eyes strained toward the bedroom doorway. A dark outline filled it, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a hat. The silhouette stepped into the faint moonlight spilling through the window. It was a man, or something, wearing the shape of one. A ranger's hat shadowed his face. His uniform looked old, torn in places. Mud and what looked like dried blood stained his sleeves, and in the hollow, where his eyes should have been, Luke saw nothing but black pits. The figure crouched slowly beside the bed, one gloved hand resting on Luke's chest. The pressure was unbearable, heavy, freezing, suffocating. The man leaned closer until Luke could smell wet earth and rot. Then, in a whisper like wind scraping across ice, the thing said, "You're not supposed to be here." Luke wanted to scream, but his lungs wouldn't obey. The figure tilted its head, studying him, before standing up and walking back toward the door. Just before vanishing into the hallway, it turned its head. Its mouth split open in a noise that wasn't human. Then everything went black. Luke shot awake to sunlight and birdsong. He could move again. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. The clock on the nightstand read 6:12 a.m. He tried to laugh it off. Sleep paralysis. He'd read about it before. A trick of the brain. His body was still half asleep, that's all. But when he got out of bed, something made him stop cold. There were muddy footprints on the wooden floor, leading from the doorway to the side of his bed and back out again. He didn't remember tracking mud inside. That afternoon, Luke drove into the nearest town, a sleepy cluster of houses around a diner and a general store. The woman behind the counter, wearing a faded Ely's Goods apron, smiled as he paid for batteries and canned food. "You staying out by the lake?" she asked casually. "Yeah, cabin 12, Luke said. Her smile faded. She hesitated, glancing toward the older man sitting by the window. He looked up from his coffee, expression flat. "Ranger Ellis used to live out there," the man said, patrolled that stretch of forest for 30 years, until he went missing. Search team found his uniform near the lake, never found him. Luke forced a small laugh. Guess I've got his old place then. The man's eyes didn't change. Some say he never left. Luke drove faster than he wanted to admit. That night, he stayed up writing. The words came easily for once, the storm outside adding rhythm to his thoughts. Around 2 a.m., thunder rolled across the hills, followed by a faint knock at the door. He froze. 3 knocks. Slow. Even. Probably the wind, he muttered, standing up. But when he looked through the window, the porch was empty, except for a set of wet boot prints leading to the door. He locked it, double-checked the windows, and went back to bed. By 3:15 a.m., exhaustion won. This time, he woke up face down. He couldn't move again. His cheek pressed into the pillow, his lungs struggling for air. And then, footsteps. Inside the cabin. He couldn't see, but he could hear. Slow, deliberate, circling the bed, wood creaked under each step. Then a faint humming began. A man's voice, deep, low, tuneless. It was coming from right behind him. The woods are watching. The woods are wide. The words dragged, distorted like something trying to remember a song. A hand gripped his shoulder, cold, heavy, real. The pressure dug deeper, pinning him harder. The humming stopped. Then, near his ear, a whisper. "You should have left with the daylight." Luke's vision tunneled. His fingers twitched barely. He forced them to move inch by inch until sensation returned. He rolled off the bed, gasping, crawling toward the lamp. The cabin was empty, but the front door was wide open, rain blowing in. A trail of muddy footprints led from the bed to the door and stopped on the porch. The next morning, the prints were gone, completely. Even the ones on the porch. By the 4th night, Luke was unraveling. He tried sleeping in the truck. Didn't help. Paralysis hit him again, and this time he woke up mud smeared on the inside of his windshield, a handprint pressed against the glass. He called the rental office that afternoon, demanding to leave early. No answer. The number was disconnected. He packed his bag and decided to leave before sundown. But when he turned the ignition, the truck didn't start. Battery dead. The sun dipped fast behind the trees. He stayed awake as long as he could, sitting by the fire, typewriter on his lap, trying to drown the fear in noise. Around 3 a.m., he must have drifted off, because when his eyes opened again, he was lying in bed. But he didn't remember getting there. He couldn't move. The air was thick, reeking of damp soil. His ears filled with the sound of breathing, not his, slow, wet, rattling breaths. The figure stood in the corner again, clearer than before. The ranger's uniform looked freshly soaked, sleeves dripping. His badge gleamed faintly in the moonlight. The hat cast a deep shadow over his face, but Luke could see enough. Pale skin, lips cracked open in a grin that showed too many teeth. He stepped closer. With each step, the floor moaned under his boots. Mud trailed behind him. He reached the bed, leaned down, and pressed one cold hand to Luke's chest again. The weight this time felt like a casket lid closing. "You're trespassing," the ranger whispered. Luke tried to fight, to will his muscles to move, but his body felt buried. "This cabin is mine," it said, voice cracking like wood. "And now, are you?" The ranger reached into his own chest pocket and pulled something out, a small metal badge covered with dirt. He forced it against Luke's chest, pressing until Luke felt the metal burn through his skin. Luke's vision blurred. His ears rang. For a brief second, he thought he heard himself echoing the same words back. Then, silence. He woke at dawn. The cabin was empty. His chest burned. When he lifted his shirt, a perfect imprint of a ranger's badge marked his skin, red and raw.
It was 2:43 a.m. when Claire Whitman woke up to the faint hiss of static. The baby monitor on her nightstand glowed green, its tiny red light pulsing like a heartbeat. She blinked, disoriented, glancing toward the crib camera display. Her daughter Ella, only 6 months old, slept soundly in her room down the hall. Claire sighed in relief and rolled onto her side, tugging the duvet over her shoulder. That's when she realized she couldn't move. Her entire body felt encased in ice. Her arms were rigid, her chest tight. The only part of her that obeyed was her eyes, darting around the dim bedroom in silent panic. The monitor crackled again. Through the white noise, a soft humming emerged. It was faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Claire's blood ran cold. It was the same lullaby she sang to Ella every night. The same rhythm, the same melody. But this voice wasn't hers. The voice was older, sadder. She strained to speak, to call for her husband Michael, but not a sound came out. The lullaby continued, slow and sweet, until it faded into static again. Then, silence. Her chest loosened all at once. She sat up, gasping for air, eyes locked on the monitor's flickering screen. The camera showed nothing but Ella's crib, empty. For a heartbeat, Claire couldn't breathe. Then she remembered Michael had brought Ella into their room before bed. She turned her head sharply. There she was, sleeping peacefully in her cot beside their bed. Claire laughed nervously, half in relief, half in disbelief. Maybe she'd been dreaming. Maybe it was exhaustion. But even as she tried to calm down, one thought wouldn't leave her. That lullaby didn't sound like a dream. The next morning, Michael brewed coffee as she sat pale and distracted at the kitchen counter. "You look like you saw a ghost," he joked, placing a mug in front of her. She didn't smile. "You didn't hear anything last night?" "Nope. Why?" "The baby monitor turned on by itself. Someone was singing to Ella." He frowned. "That's interference. Those cheap monitors pick up everything. CB radios, even phone signals." Claire nodded slowly, but she didn't believe it. She had used the same monitor for months without issue. And the voice she heard? It wasn't random noise. It was intentional. That afternoon, while Ella napped, Claire reviewed the night's recording. The device saved the last 10 minutes whenever it detected sound. She scrubbed through the static until she heard it again, faint, almost melodic. Then the voice emerged, clearer this time. "Don't worry, I'll hold her tonight." Claire's stomach twisted. She checked the footage. The nursery camera showed Ella sleeping. Nothing unusual. No movement. But when she paused the video at the exact moment the voice spoke, the audio waveform spiked violently, and the screen flickered for a half a second. A shadow passed over the crib. That night, Claire insisted on keeping Ella in their room again.
Michael teased her gently, kissed her forehead, and promised, "See, no ghosts tonight." By midnight, all three were asleep. At 2:41 a.m., the monitor light came on again. Claire's eyes snapped open. She couldn't move. Not a single muscle. Her entire body felt encased in ice. Her arms were rigid, her chest tight. The only part of her that obeyed was her eyes, darting around the dim bedroom in silent panic. The monitor crackled again. Through the white noise, a soft humming emerged. It was faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice now. Right in the room. Through the narrow slit of her vision, she could see something standing at the foot of the bed. A woman's silhouette, thin and motionless, her head tilted toward the crib beside her. Claire's heart hammered painfully. She leant closer to the baby, whispering, "You shouldn't cry. Mama's tired." Claire's eyes burned with tears. She wanted to scream, to thrash, to do anything, but her body was locked. The woman's hand, long and pale, reached toward the crib. And then Ella began to whimper. The figure froze, straightened, and turned slowly toward Claire. Its face was a blur, no features, only hollow patches where eyes should be. A thin smile stretched across the void. The monitor crackled sharply. "Go back to sleep, Claire." Everything went dark. When she woke, the sun had already risen. Ella was safe, still asleep beside her. Michael was gone for work. But the monitor lay unplugged, the cord coiled neatly beside it. She didn't remember touching it. Over the next 3 nights, it got worse. Claire started dreading sleep. Each time, the paralysis hit between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Always the same voice, always the same lullaby. Sometimes she heard footsteps pacing the nursery, sometimes whispering near the baby monitor. On the 5th night, Claire begged Michael to sleep in the nursery with Ella. "I'll take the monitor," she said, her voice shaking. "You stay with her. Just make sure she's fine if it happens again." He agreed, reluctantly. At 2:46 a.m., the monitor light came on again. Claire's eyes snapped open. She couldn't move, not a single muscle. Her paralysis already taken hold. Then came the lullaby, the same voice, the same slow rhythm. "Hush, little baby." Michael shouted through the monitor, "Who's there?" A crash echoed from the nursery, loud enough to shake the nightstand. Claire's eyes flooded with tears. She strained against the paralysis, forcing her arm to twitch, her body to move. Then, through the static, she heard Michael's voice again, but it wasn't his tone. It was flat, emotionless. "Go back to sleep, Claire. She's fine now." When she finally broke free, she ran straight to the nursery. Michael was sitting on the floor, pale, shaking, staring at the crib. The monitor camera was shattered on the ground. "Claire," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I saw her." He wouldn't describe what he had seen, only that it wasn't a dream, and that the woman knew his name. The next day, Claire called a friend from church, asking about someone who could bless the house. The woman referred her to an older priest from a nearby parish. Father Gregory arrived that afternoon. A gentleman in his 70s. He listened quietly as Claire told him everything. The paralysis, the voice, the recordings. When he played him the last audio clip, his expression hardened. He took a deep breath and said, "That's not a lullaby. It's a lament, a mourning song." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" He paused. "It's sung by mothers who lost their children. It was common in the 1800s. She's not trying to hurt your baby. She's trying to take her back." He sprinkled holy water around the rooms, muttering prayers under his breath. When he reached the nursery, the monitor light turned on by itself. The priest froze. The monitor speaker hissed, and the same voice sang, softly, almost mockingly, "You can't keep her forever." The device exploded in static. When the noise died, the priest turned pale. "I can't cleanse this," he whispered. "You need to leave." That night, Claire and Michael packed in silence. They drove to her sister's house 2 towns over, too afraid to look back. But when they arrived, Michael noticed something. In the baby diaper bag, right on top, lay the baby monitor, the same one that had shattered on the nursery floor. It was clean, untouched. The light still glowed softly. Before Michael could throw it out, the speaker crackled to life one last time. "You left too soon." Ella began to cry. 2 weeks later, Claire and Michael returned home with a priest and a technician. The nursery was empty except for the crib and the rocking chair. They replaced the flooring, painted the walls, threw away every trace of the old monitor. But every night since, no matter where they moved, the same thing happens. At 2:43 a.m., their phones record faint static from the BabyCam app. Sometimes, a soft lullaby plays through it. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Sometimes,
Oliver Grant never believed in the supernatural. He believed in light, in proof, in images. After all, photography was both his job and his obsession. He'd spent the last 8 years shooting nightlife across Manchester, capturing faces in motion, lights frozen mid-pulse. But insomnia came with the work, and lately the nights had started bleeding into one another. So when the sleep paralysis began, he told himself it was just exhaustion, a physical glitch, until the photos started appearing. It began with a single flash. He'd fallen asleep with his phone on the nightstand, camera facing the bed. At 3:16 a.m., he woke to a blinding burst of white light. His body jerked, but then froze completely. He couldn't move, not even turn his head. He heard the faint click of his phone's camera, then another, and another. Click. 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 The room was silent except for that sound, rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone was standing right beside him, taking pictures. He tried to speak, but the muscles in his jaw were locked. The air felt thick, heavy with static. The last thing he remembered before blacking out was the faint reflection of someone standing over him, silhouetted against the phone's blue glow. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds. His phone was on the floor. He picked it up, battery half dead, camera app still open, flash still on. And in the gallery, 9 new photos. Each one showed him asleep from a slightly different angle. His head turned, then straightened, then tilted again, as if he'd been posed. In the last photo, a figure leaned over him, blurred, its face completely blacked out by the flash. He deleted the pictures immediately, told himself it was some kind of bug, maybe a malfunction. He was too tired, too anxious. But the next night, he taped his phone to the lamp, lens pointing away, just to prove to himself it was nothing. At 3 a.m., the flash woke him again, except this time, the light came from inside the room, not his phone. Click. 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 He couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. Something cold brushed against his forehead, the shape of fingers. Then a whisper, so close it seemed to echo inside his skull. "Look your best." The light burst once more, and then nothing. He woke with the taste of metal in his mouth, and blood dried beneath his nose. The camera roll was full again, 23 images, all the same. Him lying motionless in bed, but in some of them, his eyes were open. And in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed at all. He stood beside it, half smiling. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room, shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room, shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos. That night, he left the phone on the dresser and tried to sleep on the sofa. At 3:14 a.m., the flash went off again. His sister burst into the living room, shouting his name. He couldn't respond. Paralysis pinned him down like ice. She grabbed his phone and turned the light off, shaking him until he gasped awake. "You were taking pictures," she said, "of yourself." When he checked the photos, his blood ran cold. Each image showed him standing up in the dark, moving around the room, eyes vacant, expression blank. But in one, taken just before dawn, his body wasn't on the bed. He stood beside it. By morning, the air in the apartment felt wrong, charged, electric. He unplugged his phone, packed a bag, and drove to his sister's flat. Just for a few nights, he told her. He didn't mention the photos.
When Ethan Palmer landed in Prague, he thought his semester abroad would finally pull him out of the fog he'd been living in. The city was beautiful, cobblestone streets, Gothic towers, and a dorm room that overlooked the Vltava River. It was old and creaky, the kind of place that whispered stories through its walls. He shared the flat with two other students, Mila from Norway and Ryan from Leeds. Both were easygoing, always laughing, always exploring. Ethan, the quiet one, stayed behind most nights, struggling with his insomnia. The problem wasn't falling asleep, it was staying asleep. Because lately, every time he closed his eyes, something watched him. The first time it happened, he woke to the sound of dripping water. He blinked into the darkness, expecting rain, but the window was closed. His room was silent, except for that steady, slow drip, drip, drip. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. His mind screamed for his muscles to obey, but his limbs felt pinned, as if someone sat on his chest. And then he saw it. At the edge of the bed, a tall figure, motionless, its head tilted to one side. He couldn't make out its face at first. It was just wrong. The body too long, the arms hanging too far down, the neck bent at an unnatural angle. When his eyes adjusted, he saw the grin.
a wide, stretched smile that looked carved into its face, teeth impossibly white against the blackness. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were nothing more than hollow sockets. The figure leaned forward. He could feel the air shift, smell something sour and metallic. Then it whispered something, not in a language he knew. The words scraped the air, backwards and wet, like someone speaking through water. He wanted to scream, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. The grin twitched wider. And then, suddenly, it was morning. The clock read 7:06 a.m. His shirt was drenched in sweat, his jaw aching like he'd been clenching it all night. He convinced himself it was a nightmare, a trick of exhaustion, jet lag. But the second night, it returned. This time, it stood closer. Ethan could see the grayish tone of its skin, stretched tight like damp paper. Its grin trembled slightly, as if struggling to hold shape. The whispering began again, faster now, looping. "Reverse my dark, never time it." He didn't understand, not until the next morning when he wrote the sounds down and held them to the mirror. The words read, "Never light, dark my ever." His stomach turned. He told Ryan about it that afternoon in the kitchen. Ryan laughed. "Mate, you're just having sleep paralysis. Loads of people get it. Just means your brain's awake, but your body's not. You're fine." Ethan nodded, pretending to believe it, but he didn't feel fine. He stopped sleeping altogether. 2, sometimes 3 nights in a row, he'd just lie in bed, lights on, headphones in, scrolling through his phone until dawn. It didn't help. Even when he stayed awake, he'd catch glimpses, a dark reflection in the window, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. Once, while brushing his teeth, he looked up and saw something smiling behind him in the bathroom. When he spun around, the bathroom was empty. By the end of the week, Ethan was unraveling. His essays were late. His hands shook constantly. Mila suggested meditation. Ryan suggested vodka. But neither could keep the thing away. On the 7th night, Ethan finally passed out from exhaustion. He woke to darkness, total darkness, no city lights, no moon. His lamp had been unplugged. He couldn't move. He felt it before he saw it. Cold air, a smell of rot. Then slowly, 2 hollow eyes opened near the ceiling. The grin followed. This time, the creature climbed down the wall like a spider, its long fingers bending backwards, bones cracking softly. It stopped halfway down, its head twisting until it was upside down, staring straight at him. It began whispering again, faster, harsher. "Ones know it's time you're never better." He didn't need a mirror to understand that one. Never better than your times now. The words made no sense, yet he felt them pierce straight through him, like a warning or a curse. The grin stretched farther until the skin tore at the corners of its mouth. Something dripped from the wound, hitting the floor with a wet sound. The lights flickered. Ethan's body trembled. Then, as quickly as it came, the thing vanished. When he woke, there were handprints on the wall above his bed, long, thin fingers, black smudges like soot. He tried telling the dorm manager. They blamed mold, poor ventilation, bad wiring. No one believed him. By now, every night was the same. 3 a.m., paralysis, whispering, the grin.
Each time the words grew louder, closer to real speech. He recorded one of the episodes on his phone, leaving the camera aimed at the corner of the room. The next morning, he played it back. At first, there was nothing, just static. Then came his own voice, muttering in his sleep, and under it, another voice, whispering his name. Ethan. His blood went cold. The whisper repeated, louder, distorted. Ethan. Then, clear as day, his voice changed. The camera showed him sitting upright, though he had no memory of it. His eyes were open but blank. He leaned toward the camera and smiled, that same too-wide grin. Then, in a guttural tone that wasn't his, he whispered, "Now you speak my tongue." The video cut to static. He didn't remember making that recording, didn't remember moving, speaking, or smiling. But the next morning, the words he'd written in his notebook, random phrases from his drafts, were rewritten all backwards. Every sentence, every letter. The final night began quietly. Ryan had gone home for the weekend. Mila was out late. Ethan sat in his bed, too afraid to close his eyes, typing an email to his professor. His hands trembled so badly he could barely hit the keys. He blinked once, and when he opened his eyes, it was 3:14 a.m. He didn't remember falling asleep. The lamp was off. His limbs were frozen. The thing stood by the door this time, but it wasn't alone. There were two of them now, identical, both with that awful grin. One crawled along the wall, the other toward the ceiling. Their whispers tangled, a constant droning hum. "Let out looker, let out looker, let out looker." Ethan's heart pounded. He realized they were saying, "Look at lover," backwards. Then the closet door creaked open. A third grin appeared in the dark. He could hear them all breathing, raspy and wet. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became words he could understand. "Let us in. Let us wear you. Let us smile through you." The air thickened, stinking of rot and iron. One of the figures lunged forward, its face stretching toward his, skin cracking like plaster. At that instant, the door burst open. Mila's voice cut through the dark. "Ethan!" The room was empty. Ethan lay frozen, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. She rushed to him, shaking his shoulder. He didn't respond. His face was contorted, jaw locked, teeth bared in a horrible smile. He woke 3 days later in a hospital bed. The doctor said he'd suffered a severe panic attack in his sleep. They found no sign of forced entry, no explanation for the bruises on his wrists. When he asked Mila about that night, she went pale. "I saw something."
When Lena Carter started her second year at university, she was just relieved to finally have a normal roommate. After a year of noisy parties and stolen food, the quiet girl who answered her advert seemed perfect. Shy, polite, a little odd maybe, but harmless. Her name was Abigail Wells. She moved in on a rainy Friday, carrying only one suitcase and a small box of books. She never looked Lena in the eyes when she spoke, never took phone calls, and always faced the wall when she slept. The first night, Lena noticed something strange. Abigail didn't turn off the light. When Lena asked if she wanted it dimmed, Abigail just shook her head and whispered, "No, please, I don't like the dark." Lena laughed and said fair enough and went to sleep. The next few weeks passed uneventfully. Abigail was distant but tidy. She always left early for class and came back late, rarely spoke, and never invited anyone over. The only odd thing was that Lena never heard her walk. No footsteps, no sound of shoes or drawers opening or even the bed creaking when she lay down. Just silence. And yet every morning, Abigail's side of the room looked slightly different. Pillow moved, blankets tucked neatly, like someone had been there. One night, around 2:30 a.m., Lena woke to the feeling of someone staring at her. She couldn't move. Her eyes were open, but her body was locked in place. The room was dim, lit only by the streetlight seeping through the blinds. Abigail stood beside her bed. Her long black hair fell forward, hiding most of her face, but her mouth was visible, smiling, wide and unnatural. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared down at Lena, her head tilted at a strange angle like a puppet with a broken neck. Lena tried to scream but couldn't make a sound. The paralysis held her like ice. Then Abigail's smile stretched wider, lips cracking at the corners. In a voice that sounded half-whisper, half-breath, she said, "You should switch sides. This one's mine." Lena's vision flickered, and then everything went black. She woke at dawn gasping, drenched in sweat. Abigail's bed was empty. For a moment, she thought it had been a dream, but when she sat up, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The pillow on her bed was flipped. Her head was resting on the wrong side. That morning, she confronted Abigail. "Did you come to my bed last night?" Abigail looked genuinely confused. "No, why?" Lena told her everything, the smile, the whisper, the paralysis. Abigail's face drained of color. "You saw her too?" Lena frowned. "What do you mean, her?" Abigail stood, trembling slightly. "I don't sleep in that bed, Lena. I can't. Someone every day." Before Lena could respond, Abigail grabbed her coat and left the room. She didn't come back that night. The next day, Lena told the landlord she wanted to switch rooms. The landlord, an older woman named Mrs. Green, seemed sympathetic at first until she mentioned Abigail. "Who?" "My roommate, Abigail Wells." Mrs. Green's expression changed. "You're mistaken, dear. You've been the only tenant in that flat since September." Lena laughed awkwardly. "That's not possible. She moved in 3 weeks ago, paid rent, unpacked, everything." Mrs. Green opened her ledger and turned it toward her. "Look for yourself. One name. Yours." Lena's mouth dried. "You're saying I've been living alone?" Mrs. Green nodded. "Maybe you're overworked. These old buildings can play tricks on the mind." But when Lena returned home, Abigail's things were gone. The suitcase, the books, the clothes, everything. Except the mirror. It hung above the empty bed, an oval frame with foggy glass, old and warped. Lena had never noticed it before. When she leaned closer, she saw faint scratch marks around the edges like fingernails dragging along the wood. And etched faintly into the bottom corner, barely visible in the light, were the words, "Sleep facing the wall." That night, Lena couldn't rest. She sat upright in bed, laptop open, searching every student record, every university page for Abigail Wells. There was nothing. No record, no enrollment, no person. By 3 a.m., exhaustion won. She turned off the light and collapsed onto her pillow. Moments later, the paralysis hit again. Her eyes opened, and she knew instantly she wasn't alone. The mirror across the room rippled like water disturbed by breath, and from within, a pale face emerged, long hair clinging to her cheeks, mouth twisting into a grin. Abigail. Her eyes were black, hollow pits. She stepped out of the mirror slowly, one leg, then the other, her movements jerky and twitching. When she spoke, the voice was wrong, deeper, distorted. "You took my side." Lena's heart pounded against her ribs. She wanted to move, to fight, but her limbs stayed pinned. Abigail crawled onto the bed, her cold fingers brushing against her arm. Her face hovered inches away, smiling that cracked smile again. Now we can share. The lights flickered. A high-pitched whine filled the room like static building to a scream. Then, darkness. Lena woke at dawn, shaking. The bed was empty again. The mirror was still. She grabbed her phone and called Mrs. Green immediately. "Something's wrong in that room. I'm leaving today. You can keep the deposit." Mrs. Green didn't argue. Before leaving, Lena took one last look at the mirror. The glass was clouded, almost opaque now. But as she turned away, she caught a flicker, a shadow moving inside the reflection. And faintly, from somewhere deep within the mirror, a voice whispered, "Don't forget to face the wall." A week later, Lena moved into a new flat across town. The nightmares stopped, until one morning she woke to find a small, oval mirror lying on the kitchen counter. It wasn't hers. She hadn't packed it. The glass was foggy, cracked at the edges, and when she looked closely, she could see the faint outline of a girl standing behind her in the reflection. Her head tilted, her mouth stretched into a wide, crooked smile. "Miss me?" The mirror shattered in her hands. Later that day, the landlord of her old flat called. "We had the place inspected," Mrs. Green said. "Behind the wall near the bed, the workers found something." Lena's throat tightened. "What?" "They found a small cavity, like someone had been sleeping inside it." She paused. "And there were bones. Girls, around 20 years old." The line went quiet. "Did they find her name?" Lena whispered. Mrs. Green hesitated. "There was a bracelet engraved A.W." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She threw the shards of the mirror into the bin, locked every door, every window. But as the clock struck 2:30 a.m., her phone screen lit up. A new message. From Abigail. Photo attached. Hands shaking, Lena opened it. It was a picture of her bed, taken from above. She was lying there, asleep, and beside her, someone else was smiling at the camera.
For most people, the road is a way to get somewhere. For Paul Denton, it was home. He'd been a long-haul truck driver for nearly 20 years. No wife, no kids, just an 18-wheeler and a radio that never stopped humming. The endless hum of tires on asphalt was comforting, predictable, until the night the radio spoke his name. He was driving through New Mexico, just past midnight. The sky was a deep bruise of cloud, the air heavy with the scent of rain and diesel. After 12 hours on the road, he pulled into a rest stop off Highway 285, shut off the engine, and reclined his seat. The storm outside rolled closer, lightning flashing behind the mountains. He flicked on his CB radio, mostly for company. Channel 19, the trucker's channel. Static. He closed his eyes. The static lulled him like white noise. Until it didn't. Through the hiss came a faint voice. Low. Familiar. Paul. His eyes snapped open. Paul Denton. Can you hear me? He grabbed the mic. Who is this? The line went silent, only the static breathing softly back. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. Don't fall asleep. You won't wake up. He dropped the mic, looked at the radio. It was still on Channel 19. No trucker prank, no feedback. Just silence. He told himself it was exhaustion. Every driver hit the wall sooner or later. He shut the radio off and leaned back, eyes heavy. But sleep didn't bring rest. It brought paralysis. When he woke, he couldn't move, couldn't blink. The cab was dark, the world outside invisible except for the faint red glow of his dashboard clock, 3:07 a.m. The CB radio was on again, even though he'd turned it off. Soft static filled the cab, whispering like wind. Paul. The voice was his own.
"You left me on the road." The sound wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming through it. The metal of the speaker vibrated, rattling faintly. He could see his reflection in the windshield, motionless, pale, but behind it, in the dark glass, another face was forming. His, only smiling. "Keep driving," the reflection said. The radio crackled again. "I'm still on the road." The world tilted. Paul forced a breath out, and suddenly his body unlocked. He slammed the cab light on, gasping for air. The reflection was gone. The windshield was empty. But the CB light was still blinking red. The next morning he stopped at a diner outside Roswell. His hands trembled so badly he spilled coffee on the counter. "You okay, driver?" the waitress asked. He forced a smile. "Didn't sleep much." She poured him more coffee. "Ain't the first time. Lot of you truckers see things on the night road. Ghost lights, figures walking the median. They say the road keeps the ones who never stopped driving." Paul looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Highway 285. Old legend. Some driver crashed out there 20 years ago. Folks say he's still trying to make his last delivery." She laughed lightly. "Spooky, huh?" He didn't laugh. That night, he drove north. The road was empty, black as tar, headlights stretching into nothing. He turned the CB off entirely, but at 2:57 a.m., the static began again. Even with the power switch off, the voice returned. Breaker 19, calling Paul Denton. He gripped the wheel tighter. "You left me behind." The radio light pulsed red with each word. He yanked the power cord from the wall. The light went out. But the voice didn't stop. Now it was coming from the engine, deep, vibrating through the metal. "Pull over." He tried to ignore it, but the steering wheel began to turn on its own, slowly drifting the truck toward the shoulder. He fought it, pressed his foot to the gas, but the pedal wouldn't move. "You're tired, Paul. Let me take it from here." He slammed his hand into the dash, shattering the radio screen. Sparks spat across the cab. The truck stalled. Silence. When he looked up, there was a man standing in the middle of the road. Headlights carved his figure out of the rain, tall, broad, wearing Paul's jacket. The man smiled and raised his hand in a small wave. Then he stepped forward, straight into the truck's grill, and vanished. Paul didn't sleep for 3 days after that. He kept driving, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. The only sound was the low hum of the tires and the faint echo of his heartbeat in his ears. But no matter how far he went, the odometer numbers didn't make sense. He'd drive for hours, and it would only rise by a mile. He checked his GPS. It said he hadn't moved. The road outside was endless, the same stretch of cracked asphalt, same dead billboard, same patch of scrubland. He wasn't going anywhere. By the fourth night, his body gave out. He pulled onto the shoulder, killed the engine, and collapsed into the seat. The paralysis hit the moment his eyes closed. This time, the radio didn't hiss. It sang, a soft hum, a distorted tune that rose and fell like a lullaby. And then came his own voice, gentle, almost kind. "It's better if you rest. I'll keep driving." A hand, cold and solid, rested on his shoulder. "We can share the road now." He tried to move, to fight, but his limbs were lead. In the reflection of the windshield, he saw himself sitting upright, both hands on the wheel, eyes glowing faint red from the dashboard light. He watched his own reflection smile. "You'll feel better when you wake up." And then, the truck started to roll. When he opened his eyes, sunlight was burning through the windshield. The truck was parked outside a gas station 50 miles north of where he'd stopped. The keys were still in the ignition. The tank was full. He didn't remember a single second of driving, but the dash cam had recorded everything. When he played it back, his stomach turned. At 3 a.m., the footage showed the truck starting on its own.
At 3:02, Paul's sleeping body slid from the passenger seat into the driver's seat, eyes open. At 3:07, he looked straight into the camera and smiled. 2 days later, police found Paul's truck abandoned at another rest stop, engine running, headlights on. The cab was empty except for his logbook, which ended abruptly at 3:07 a.m. The last line he wrote was short: "He's still driving." Weeks passed before they shut the investigation. Official cause: driver fatigue, probable crash. But the truck was never found again. And to this day, truckers still pick up his voice on Channel 19 between 3 and 3:30 a.m. Breaker 19, anyone there? If you answer, he asks where you're headed. He might even joke about bad coffee or long miles. But if you stay on the line too long, he always ends the same way: "I'm still on the road. You should keep me company." And some nights, they say, when you glance in your side mirror, you'll see a second pair of headlights, matching your speed perfectly, no driver behind the wheel.